here.
Recording in
All right, recording in progress. There we go. Okay, so today we've been through an awful lot of stuff with this getting started series. We started from, geez, I don't know even what ham radio is, up to I can program my radio and make contacts. And so now we're going to talk about what else can I do with amateur radio. And a thing that I hear a lot, mostly because I'm the one saying it, is I'm only a technician, right? So there's limits to what I can do. But I want people to think about that. If you're a technician, you actually have learned quite a bit in order to get that license. You have specific privileges that have been granted, and they are not insignificant privileges. If you compare technician class with the old novice class, we have a lot of things that we can do. We're going to talk about some things in a minute here. But with your technician license, you can use VHF and UHF to talk on repeaters and via simplex. We do that all the time, right? But what else can you do? Well, there's a lot of things that we can do besides just talk on repeaters and simplex. So let's look at the technician privileges. Everybody's seen this band chart before. I'm going to see if I can get this window to hide or move out of the way here so that it's not. There. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Dan. So everybody has seen this chart before. We're going to zoom in on it a little bit, and we're going to look at our technician privileges. So we all know that we have privileges on 2 meters, 1¼ meters, and 70 centimeters. We have full privileges on these bands, the same as extra class, advanced, and general. And we have more privileges than novice. If you notice, novice can't use 2 meters or 70 centimeters, and they have only 25 watts maximum on the 1¼ meter. And they can't use the secret part of the 1¼ meter band, which is shown in orange over there. I found an interesting page about that, and I sent it out to the mailing list. I don't know if anybody's looked at that or watched the video on it or anything, but there's actually this megahertz of band over there on the other side of 220 that we have privileges to use for data, and it's quite interesting.
It's a little limited. It's storing forward stuff.
It is very limited. There are certain things we are allowed to do there and certain things we're not, but it's very interesting. Some people have called it the secret band or the hidden band, but the zombie band I've heard. But yeah, we're not going to talk a lot about that one, but we do have significantly more privileges than novice if you look at VHF and UHF, right? We also have full privs on the 6 meter band, which is not shown here because I couldn't fit it all on the screen. But we also, if we want to go higher than UHF, we have privileges on 900 megahertz, 1.2 gigahertz, and other microwave and higher bands are open for us. So if you look at this, you can see we have full privileges on this 33 centimeter band, the 900 megahertz band. We have full privileges on the 23 centimeter band, which is gigahertz frequencies, more than the novices has. Novices are stuck with 5 watts on a limited section of that band. What are they going to do with 5 watts? Well, you can do a lot with 5 watts at that frequency, but still, we do have a lot more privileges than they do there. And then all licensees except novices are authorized all modes on these other bands that are listed at the bottom here, right? So if you happen to notice, 2.4 gigahertz is in there, and that's where Wi-Fi, the 2.4 gigahertz Wi-Fi lives, and 5.8 gigahertz is where the Wi-Fi 5 lives. And we have privileges on those bands. And so we can actually use the Wi-Fi frequencies to do things, not just Wi-Fi. In fact, there are contests to build high performance Wi-Fi antennas and try to get the longest Wi-Fi shot that you can get. And currently the record is 237 miles. In the references page at the end, I have a link to a page that talks about that particular experience. But I've seen some of these antennas, and they are like, 10 feet high, and they're built with all kinds of different structure to them and stuff. They're quite interesting. So, but that's something that we can do as technicians. We can operate on those bands with full privileges. We can do whatever we want up there, as long as it's, not illegal stuff. But yeah, so we definitely have privileges on the higher frequencies. And what about lower bands? The assumption is, well, we can't really use HF, right? Well, we actually can use HF. Technicians have privileges on 10 meters. 10 meters is an HF band. We have privileges on 10 meters for a single sideband phone. Phone is voice, if you remember from your technician test, and data privileges on the 10-meter band. Now, it's only limited to 28 to 28 and a half megahertz, and we're limited to 200 watts of power. But 10 meters has been doing some amazing things lately. And if you've got a radio that will do it, you can get on that 10-meter band and talk to people on the other side of the country. I know Paul runs a 10-meter net every week, and he's told me he's talked to people in Ohio, he's talked to people all over the place, places you would not imagine you could reach on 10 meters. Now, if you think about 10 meters, it's CB radio is 11 meters. And so 10 meters has very similar characteristics to CB radio as far as its propagation. And if you think about what you can do on that 10-meter band, even with 200 watts or less, you can really get out there a lot. We also have CW permissions on 15 meters, 40 meters, and 80 meters, also limited to 200 watts. Now, as soon as I say CW, people's eyes glass over because it's like, oh, I didn't even get my license until I didn't have to have CW anymore, right? Because you guys know CW is Morse code. CW stands for continuous wave. It's Morse code. It's the bread and butter of the old telegraph system, right? And so you say, well, I don't know CW. Well, that can be remedied. You can learn CW, okay? It's not that hard to learn. There are plenty of resources available online to learn Morse code. One thing to think about, it's not a new language. You're just learning a new alphabet for the language that you already know, okay? It's still English. The words are all the same. The grammar is the same. You don't have to learn anything crazy. All you're doing is you're training your ear to hear the sounds and translate them into the words in your head. Just like you learned the sounds of the letters as you say them, it's the same kind of process. There's lots of different techniques you can use to learn it. There's a couple of links here on learning Morse code. How many people in the room already know Morse code? So a few people are like, yeah, Pico Morse code. Yeah. I know nano Morse code, but yeah, so, and Paul knows Morse code. So used to be required for all license classes to have a Morse code rating. Then they released that requirement for technician class. That's when I got my license. And then later they released it for general and extra class as well. So you no longer have to know Morse code to get licensed. But if you want to learn Morse code, you can do that. You're going to want some kind of a practice oscillator. So a practice oscillator is basically a Morse code key or paddles attached to something that beeps at you. And that way you can make the noises and hear the sounds as you're doing it. Okay. Dan brought one that he's been using to practice in a couple of months ago to show off. So also Bruce in the club, KK7ZZ, he has some kits that you can use to build your own practice oscillator for Morse code, or you can buy one. There's one I've seen, it's called Morserino. It's not available right now. They're looking at bringing it out again. It looks like it's pretty cool. One thing that you need to do if you decide to go this route is decide if you want to learn straight key or paddles. So if you look at the business end of Morse code, it's going to look like one of these two devices. And these, it won't look exactly like this, right? But the idea is the straight key on the left there, when you push down, it's transmitting. When you let go, it's not. So you push down and hold it for 3 beats for a dash or 1 beat for a dot, and you let go for the inner dot dash gaps, right? And the inner word space, inner letter and inner word spaces. The gadget on the right is called, well, I've heard it called a bug. I've heard it called paddles. The idea is that it's hooked up to a circuit that generates dots and dashes. So anytime you push one of those paddles, it's going to make dots. And when you push the other one, it's going to make dashes. And it does that automatically at the right speeds that you've set. Paul's waving his hand at me here. What do you got?
A bug actually is a mechanical device that generates the dashes or the dots automatically, but you still have to manually time the dashes with your thumb. So that requires no additional circuitry. It's all mechanical.
Gotcha.
That's why they call it a bug. It's quite buggy. You can never get.
So Paul tells us that a bug is actually a mechanical device that just generates repeated dot tones or the tones. So you'd have to hold the button down longer to get the dash, but you don't have to. How does it know if you're doing a dash or a dot?
It's your thumb is the dashes and that's manual. Your finger holds the dot side and that'll spew out a.
So if you hold the button on the right, it'll just spew dots all day long.
Until the spring runs.
Yeah, right. Until it breaks. Yeah. And then if you push the left button, so you got to push both to get dashes.
No, you just push the left one to get dashes.
So same as the paddle interface, but the mechanics is different.
Yeah, except that if you hold that one, it'll make dash, 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 dash. If
I
you hold
got
the bug,
it'll just beep continuously. I got it. Okay. So on a bug, you're either making dots or you're making a single tone. And so you have to know how long you want your tone to be for your dashes. With the paddles and a keyer, it will make dashes if you push the dash key, and it'll make dots if you push the dot key. Dan's waving at me.
And then you can squeeze the two paddles. There's an iambic paddle where you squeeze it. And if you start with the left hand paddle and then the right one, it does something different than if you push the
right one and then the
right
left one
and then squeeze it together. It does the dots and dips. And there's also single paddles where
it's just a single lever.
I have it. It has two contacts.
You push it either left or right.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of different ways of controlling the dots and dips.
And you can do it on a keyboard.
We're going to talk about that. Okay.
So if you're wuss.
Hey, I resemble that.
So option 2 is use a computer. Computers can generate and convert the CW signal into text and the text that you type into CW signals. So there's a company called prep.com. They sell a gadget called the MMX. It's a little tiny QRP transceiver. Did you bring it with you, Dan?
You know, I'm going to blame it on that because when that arrived, I had my bag right next to when Jill gave me the box. Everything else went out.
Everything left your brain. Yeah. Okay.
So I apologize.
So Dan has one of these MMX devices, and basically everything is in the box. It has the transceiver in it. It has the computer in it. You plug a keyboard into it. It has a little display on it, or you can plug a monitor into it, and it will do the CW to tone translation for you. And you can get it for either 40 or 20. Do you have an 80? So it's like 3 different bands you can get on it, 20, 40, and 80.
Yep.
And you need a different little module that plugs in for each one. And you can have all 3 modules at the same time. For a technician, you would want to get one for 40 and 80, and you can buy it for about $440. It also will play the tones to you so your brain can associate what you're typing with the tones that you're hearing and what you're reading with the tones that you're hearing. So kind of a cool gadget. Dan.
One of the things that is nice about this PrepCom version is they really dialed in the algorithms. If you're talking to somebody, if you're listening to somebody that's doing 23 words a minute, the little box will
do 23 words a minute.
Yeah. And you can type as fast as you want, and it'll cue that up, and you can see where it's going along, right? And then if you do another cue, so someone that's doing 7 words a minute, it'll do 7 words a minute. So
pretty slick.
And it'll go up to 60 words a minute.
Yeah. So if you really don't want to learn CW, but you still want to play CW, one of these little gadgets is a pretty cool thing to have. And there's also other software you can get if you already got a radio. You don't want to use the little MMX QRP box. You want to use your own radio for that. There's a software package called FL Digi. It has a setting that will let you do CW encoding and decoding. There's other packages as well.
I can take my MMX and plug it into my 891. And
So you can use it as a key, basically.
Yeah. So I can now do 100 watts on it.
So, yeah.
So does it have its own amplifier in it? Like, do you hook an antenna right onto it, or how does it transmit
Yeah.
the data?
Yeah, it's literally it's QRP, it's less than 5 watts. But I use it up on my property and, you know, I'm on an 8,000 foot mast. That top of the mountain. And
8,000 foot mast made out of dirt.
it's very wide.
It's not going to fall over. It's more like a tower than a mast. It doesn't need guy wires.
Yeah, and I mean, I can the noise you know up there is nothing, and yeah, I play with that. It's actually quite fluid, and you know you only need a few watts to get out there, right? Yes, I'm not going to do moon bounce, you know, soon, but
So you can use a computer to do your CW, and you can operate on those bands as a technician. You can operate on 40 and what did I say it was? 40 and 80?
40 and 15.
80, 40. Well, the MMX won't do 15, but if you have another radio, you could do it on 15, right? So yeah, so that's definitely an option if you don't want to learn CW, and it will kind of help you learn CW as well, because like I say, it does play the sounds at you. So you start associating the sounds with the letters that you're seeing. And that's one of the cool things about the paddles is when you start working with the paddles, you just hold the buttons until it sounds right. And then you move on, right? So you're not trying to do the dots and dashes individually. All right. So let's talk about some VHF, UHF options. So there's other things to do on VHF and UHF other than just talk on repeaters. There are digital modes. We've got DMR, we've got D-Star, we've got Yaesu System Fusion. DMR and D-Star are worldwide linked systems with talk groups. You can talk to people on the other side of the planet. I know Ragnar does this all the time. He's on the Norway talk group and talks to people in Norway. That's where he's from, and does that quite often. You can pick up different groups, different talk groups from all over the place. It's really quite fun. There's packet radio, which we've talked about before. There's VARA FM, which is kind of like a higher speed packet radio. It's not, it's got some good things that I like. It's got some not so great things that I don't like about it, but it does work pretty well. And there's like a chat functionality, like a keyboard to keyboard communications with VARA, the VARA protocol. You can do WinLink, which is like email on the radio. You can do APRS. We had a class on APRS last month. In the pictures here, I've got a WinLink application in the middle of the screen, and on the right, I've got an APRS view of the valley. There's also single sideband on 2 meters that you can do. So upper sideband is used from 144.100 to 144.275. And JS8 and FT8 have defined calling frequencies on 2 meters. I don't know if anybody's doing 2 meter single sideband around here, but
there's a net.
Is there a net? So Paul says, yes, it is happening. I know Ragnar used to do it a lot, but I haven't heard. You do have to have a radio that will do single sideband on 2 meters to do this. Those are not super common. You have to get one of those shack in the box radios that's all mode, all band type of rig. But yeah, so
antenna is horizontally polarized.
And your antenna is horizontal, not vertical, right? So it's a little different. But it's an interesting mode, and it has interesting characteristics about it too. So plus it gives you a little bit of that SSB experience, that single sideband experience.
It has a significant range advantage over FM for the same power.
Paul points out a significant range advantage. In fact, I know Ragnar told me that when he used to run it from up at the mouth of Parley's Canyon, he would be talking to people north of Bountiful. And so it was actually going either around the mountain or over the top of the mountain and coming back into them. So very interesting propagation characteristics for 2 meters in that mode. So that's an option that you can use. Other VHF and UHF activities, you can get involved in public service events. There are two groups here in Utah that are doing this, managing this. The Utah SAG is one of them, and the Amateur Radio Public Service Events Group up in Cache Valley is also doing this. They don't do nearly as many events as Utah SAG does. They have kind of an interesting history between them and Utah SAG. So ARPSE was actually around first. And when Mickey started Utah SAG, he didn't want anything to do with ARPSE. And so they went their separate ways. But that may change now that Mickey's no longer with us. I don't know
Nope.
if there's been any conversations. Apparently not.
Nope.
So you can get involved with your local club. Welcome everybody to your local club. Clubs offer a lot of different activities and you can learn about a subject. What I really want people to do is learn about a subject and teach a class. I don't want to sit up here and teach every class, folks. So if you find something that's interesting to you, you want to teach a class about it, please teach a class about it. I would be very happy to get you into the schedule. You can take CERT training from your local city and use your communication skills to help them out. When we did, so a couple of years ago, 2 years ago, we did a CERT class as part of the club. And we had, what did we have? We had probably 8 people from Mark take the class and probably another 10 from some other groups take the class. And when we did our final exercise at the end, where you actually go into a building and rescue victims from situations, we used our radios to communicate. And the firefighters who were teaching the class said that ours was the most organized, best handled class that they had ever seen. And I've actually been talking with Mac Lund at the Murray Fire Department here, who does the CERT classes, about doing a communications module for them. And there is a communications module for the CERT training that they've never incorporated because they never had anybody to teach it. And so we may participate in that and help them teach that portion of the course. So you can teach your neighbors about radio communications. You know, if they see you talking on your radio, they may get interested. They may not. Other activities, you can check out fox hunts. I know Taylorsville does a fox hunt every month. What do they do? A second Saturday? Second Saturday of every month.
Started doing it at noon.
Basically, the idea is somebody hides a radio transmitter somewhere and you have to figure out where it is and go find it. And so you do that with direction finding techniques. So you'll want a directional antenna like a Yagi. A lot of people have a Yagi antenna that they've made with a tape measure and some PVC. It's relatively easy to make one for 2 meters or for 70 centimeters as far as that goes. And there's instructions on this site right here on how to do it. You can look for fox hunts in your local area. I know Taylorsville is doing them every month. They have on their website section where they talk about that. The next one's going to be this Saturday, the 16th. This Saturday, not this Saturday, next Saturday.
That couldn't be this Saturday because the 16th would be the third Saturday.
Yeah. Yeah. So it is not this Saturday, but a week from this Saturday. And they'll be doing it at Valley Regional Park, which is, if you're familiar with the Taylorsville area on 2700 West between 47th and 53rd, there is a huge park with ball fields and stuff. That's the park that they usually do it at. So,
Second Saturday would be this coming Saturday.
Yes, it is this Saturday.
it's
not-
this Saturday.
Yes,
So the 9th,
The website said it was the 16th, so I think. I could be wrong.
they might have postponed it for a rule on side of town, might be for Veterans Day.
I don't know.
Okay.
But I think it said on the website that it's the 16th, and I think it said it's at 11 o'clock. for winter hours. So, anyway, check that out if you have a directional antenna. Even if you don't have one, you can tag along with somebody and see how they do it. And then you'll be interested in building your own directional antenna and doing it. So that's a thing. All right.
Before you go away from there,
Oop, yep.
not only is fox hunting a game, but we use these fox hunting antennas, the tape measure antennas, to actually help search for a person who is transmitting illegally on the ham radio. And so we had people all around the county looking for that signal. And I was at the mapping area, and they would tell in their coordinates, and then they would tell me what
They're bearing.
what the azimuth they were shooting. And we were, you start triangulating where these things are. So we actually did it in a real life situation where you're looking for signals, and you want to get real close to exactly, not just a 25-degree cone of it's in there. With these antennas, you can get really close.
You catch him?
Say it.
Did you catch him?
He was caught. Yeah.
I should point out, it's not just people transmitting illegally intentionally either. There was a situation a couple of years ago where in August in the afternoons, all of a sudden there was something interfering with
I remember that.
146.62
I
repeater.
remember that.
It turned out to be an overheating doorbell transformer in an attic. And as the afternoon went by and it got hotter and then cooled off, the frequency would drift up and down the 2-meter band.
Mm,
And the only reason they noticed it on 6.2 is because it doesn't use PL tone.
right. Interesting. So they probably saved somebody's house from burning down by finding that, possibly.
Yeah.
Interesting. So yeah, this direction finding stuff is actually quite useful. It can be quite useful. So
The Taylor's little calendar shows it was this past, or that it's this coming Saturday the 9th.
it's the 9th. Okay, so not the 16th, it's the 9th this month
11 a.m. Gary C. Swenson Valley Regional Park.
at 11 a.m. Okay. All right, so let's talk about some higher bands other than VHF, UHF. So we talked about how we have privileges on these other bands. 900 megahertz, there's some cool stuff going on up there right now with a thing called Mesh-tastic. Were you able to bring your Mesh-tastic gear?
No. But I will tell you, well, go ahead and explain them.
Okay, so basically what Mesh-tastic is an open source decentralized mesh network. So what a mesh network is basically you've got nodes that all want to talk to each other. And so they figure out who's close to them and they talk to the node that's close to them, and it relays across through this kind of mesh diagram or network. And the idea is that if a node disappears, the mesh just works around that and restructures and continues working. And if a new node appears, it folds itself into the existing mesh and takes on the role that it needs to as it's in there. And so you can add things to the mesh and take them out all the time, and it still continues to work. What Mesh-tastic is, it's using LoRa, which is long range communications on 915 megahertz in the US. It's on 884 or something like that in Europe. But here in the US, it's on 915 megahertz, which is in the amateur band. Non-hams can use this, but they have serious power restrictions on what they can do. And hams are essentially, what's our limit? 1,500 watts. I mean, it's,
Yeah.
So, we're not going to do 1,500 watts because you don't use more than you need to use. But there's a lot of interest right now in building one of these Mesh-tastic networks here in the Valley.
I just sent you a screenshot to your email address. Saturday, when we had the Arden drill going on, 3 of us brought along our little Mesh-tastic radios, which the 3 of us all have one that was $50 or under. And never got a chance to pull them out and look at them during the event. When I got home, I called it up. I happened to think of it, and I called it up, and it had connected with the other two guys' nodes over a 9+ mile path. So I sent Jan this screenshot.
Let's see if this opens here. I don't know if I can make this any bigger.
What's the range of one of those things?
The record is something like 260 kilometers. And they run
You mean for Laura or for one of these mesh testing boxes?
for one of the Meshtastic boxes. So what you're looking at here is the first thing on my status page here shows my node, which is only, the way it works is your phone serves as a terminal for it via Bluetooth. So once your phone connects to it, the little 900 megahertz radio finds others of its kind and connects to make a mesh network. So what this found was, I was at Utah Poison Control up at the University of Utah campus. KK7QQO and N7KIP were both at the Intermountain Healthcare Administration Building on Lake Park Boulevard in West Valley near Bangor and 201. That's about 9.7 miles. And they just hooked up and found each other, and it left a note on my phone showing that it had made that connection. The reason it doesn't show any of the connections to the Meshtastic nodes that are operated by non-licensed people is because if you put it in ham mode, it will only connect with licensed people, which is required by Part 97 rules anyway. But I laughed when I got home because we struggled all day making the 5 gigahertz microwave stuff connect like we wanted it to. And I got home and found out that Meshtastic running a 1/10 of a watt to a rubber duck had made these two connections without my even looking at it. So what this would do is you can send text messages up to 228 characters from your phone. If the grid is down, it will go via Bluetooth to the Meshtastic radio and out on the local grid independent Meshtastic network.
Okay, let's go back.
It's all fine and dandy though until it becomes self-aware.
So the hardware to get started on this is pretty cheap. This particular unit that I have in the picture here, you can buy it. Actually, I just ordered one for $90. They had it on sale and they were out of stock. And I was like, oh man, they're out of stock. And I put my email address in and said, let me know when you have stock. And all of a sudden on Monday, they had stock again. So they had 57 units. So I ordered one. I don't have it yet. It's coming from Florida. But this gadget here has the Meshtastic board, the LoRa module, a GPS module, and I think one other module. It's got a little tiny screen on it. It's got some buttons on the side, and it has the antenna and a battery all in this box for $90. So I'm going to play around with it when I get it and try to figure out what I can do with it. But yeah, you use your cell phone to connect to it, control it, and send and receive text messages. So it's kind of a cool little gadget, kind of fun to play with. And it seems to work fairly readily. So we'll see how that network builds out and how many people start using it. Higher than that in the Wi-Fi range. Yes.
Can you make private networks with that technology?
So remember with ham radio, nothing is really private. You can't use encryption. So anybody can hear what you're doing. I don't know if you can have a unconnected network of your own, like a separate network. Paul, can you do that?
You can do that, but it's still not.
It's not really private.
It's as private as there's something called security through obscurity.
Yeah.
In other words, nobody's going to find it.
Right.
But it works two ways. If you see a bunch of nodes that are visible to your node, you can pick one and send a message to them, and it won't show up on anyone else's screen. If you just send a message without specifying a recipient, it goes out to everybody who's within range of you. So there's a couple different ways to use it, but yeah, you cannot if you put it in ham radio mode, which allows a little more power and allows you to talk to other hams legally, then you cannot encrypt it.
Well, I wasn't talking about encryption, just wondering if you could set up like a separate network for, say, a certain area, certain individuals.
You can, but then it's hard, you have to have enough of them.
To have the mesh.
To become a mesh network,
Sure.
because they rely on relaying to each other. So,
So you need one to another long distances?
Yes, it will relay across.
So your screenshot only showed three. They'll both supply or it's some far away?
that is because I have it set on a frequency slot that is not in use by the general public. Only a few hams in the valley are on it. If you go on the general public one, it will, and leave it on for 3 hours and come back, it'll show 100 nodes. However, that's almost too much. You know, it's like,
There's a certain location where they are? Well,
yes, if they have GPS.
If they have the GPS enabled. So, yeah, it's a very interesting technology, and it definitely bears more investigation and understanding. So we'll probably have a class on Meshtastic by itself down the road a little ways, probably for one of our advanced sessions, but
We could have a lot of fun with it if we can take it outdoors where the antennas work better.
it looks really interesting. So we'll see what we can do with it. All right, so Wi-Fi frequencies. So there's this thing called Airden mesh networking that is currently being explored by Salt Lake County Aries. It's using a bunch of hardware that is basically wireless ISP hardware. So WISP is wireless internet service provider. That would be somebody like I think Vivint was doing that for a while. They still do it to some extent. But basically, if you couldn't get high speed like fiber to your home, you could get a Wi-Fi signal to your house and you could access the internet that way. Well, that hardware is out there and it exists, and people have taken a hold of that and adapted it to doing other things than just being a wireless ISP. And so with the Airden software or firmware, I guess I should call it software. It's not really firmware. It's really like an operating system that gets installed on the device. But with that, you can build mesh networks using Wi-Fi protocols. And we're looking at doing that here in the Valley. There's already a significant amount of that going on in Davis County, and Utah Valley has some going on. We want to get that going here in the Salt Lake Valley, and Salt Lake County Aries has been kind of spearheading that. The idea is you take one of these devices, you flash it with the customized operating system, and then you put it on an appropriate channel and it joins the mesh. Now, these things are much more directional, but they're also significantly higher power and higher speed, and they can do basically any IP protocol stuff that you can do. So you can do VoIP, you can do video conferencing, high-speed file sharing. You're not limited to 288 character text messages like you are with Meshtastic, right? You can do any kind of thing that you can do on the internet, you can do on this kind of a network. And so we're in the process of designing and building out some network infrastructure here in Salt Lake County, and we'll see how we do on that and what kind of support we get. But it's a very interesting project, and I'd love to get more people involved in it. There's actually a guy down in Ephraim that is selling these old Ubiquiti power beams and light beam dishes for $20 each. And I don't know, how many did he have? Well, you said
We pretty much cleaned him out.
have we cleaned him out?
I think he had 8 or 10 left.
So he's still got some left, but the group bought 30 of them. In fact, one guy bought 10.
Yeah.
So
But those work independently of the internet?
these are independent of the internet. You can tie them into the internet, but you do not have to. They make basically a separate network. And we've done a class on this mesh networking technology before, specifically with Airden. We'll probably do another one sometime next year, but it's very interesting and exciting. There's a lot of things that can be done with this, especially in conditions where the internet is down or not available for some reason. For example, if the cell phone network goes down, but your air to network is up, you can run a software phone app on your phone and make calls to other people across the air to network without a cell phone provider, without the internet. So um, it's very interesting, and we're doing some cool stuff with it. And we're kind of in that proof of concept stage right now where we're trying to show people, look, we can do some things. We don't know what kinds of things, but some things we can do, and we're going to get out there and do them and show you, and hopefully draw up some interest from the served agencies that will get them to let us put antennas on their buildings and stuff like that. So
Yeah, the exercise Saturday was with Intermountain Healthcare. To demonstrate some of the high-speed data things we could do. They were impressed, and the next step will be to see if we can get permanent nodes on some of their high buildings, which would then make a network that would be useful to hams for anything 365 days a year. So,
Especially if it's got that kind of broadband capability.
yeah. Yeah, it's basically it's a like a private internet essentially.
we could demonstrate VoIP phones here some night if you want to do.
We can definitely do that, and we will do that in a future class, I'm sure. I thought about dragging some gear in here tonight, but then I thought, well, I'm probably not going to have time to dig into that too much. But maybe we'll have some time when we get done. We'll see.
So you say this guy has 10 left?
So maybe 8 left, but there's other hardware that you can get, and it's not that expensive.
He's got more than 8, but.
When I was there, he was
Really?
getting down there. He advertised like 46 of one model and 38 of another or something like that in the information at KSL.com ad or. But he gets them every once in a while. They're surplus from Centricom, which is an internet service provider in central Utah. And when a customer changes to fiber or Comcast or whatever, or moves, and they take the dish down that they've installed at their home or business, that becomes surplus. And instead of just sending them to the landfill, they advertise them, and there are lots available surplus.
So do you have his contact information?
We could probably get it.
I have it, yes.
Do you have it, Jan?
Yeah.
I'll talk to you.
It costs more to drive down there than it does.
Right? Yeah, because he's charging like $20 per node. So you can also buy like the SXT, Microtech SXT SQ Lite is about under $50. And it's a little unit about this big that you can mount on a pole, and it weighs about maybe 6 ounces.
Yeah.
And it will be not quite as good as one of these light beams or power beams, but it's still very effective. We've got a lot of people have those and have been working with them. Yeah.
Speaking of poles, I have a couple of telescoping. Pretty deep poles and there's the, go pretty cheap, they go to 65 feet.
Wow.
Wow.
I might be interested in something like that. So I need something to get above the trees. My house is surrounded by trees, so it's really hard for me to do this Wi-Fi stuff at home because hang on a second.
Respond to psychiatric problem at 127 West Vine Street. Respond on the fire 2 near 5100 South. Engine 81 and medic ambulance 81. Respond to psychiatric problem at 127 West Vine Street. Respond on that fire 2 near 5100 South. Time of 1919.
25, but I'm not sure.
Respond
what
on
I
that
want to keep.
So
Well, it's not anything put on the trailer. This is a heavy duty, you want to make it in the ground. And then you hoist it out, it's got cable pulleys that, one's got a crank down on the other one, you have to. I put like a winch in there, and hoist that thing out.
Is it designed to be rough guys?
Oh, yeah, we're mainly probably, it's.
okay. So one of the things about this microwave technology is they say it can go about 30 miles or through one tree. So with the way my house is with trees all around it, it's not something that I can take a huge amount of advantage of. I've got some plans in the works, but we'll see what ends up happening. But yeah, so let's talk about some other esoteric technician options. Satellite operations. How many people have ever operated on a satellite before? Paul has, Dan has. Basically, if you see this little girl here on the left, she's got a Yagi antenna that she's pointing into space at a satellite, and she's making a contact with a satellite. And so you can send a signal. There's a repeater on a satellite somewhere in orbit, and you can send a signal to that, and it will transmit it back down to the Earth. And you can make contacts with other people through a satellite. You can also make contacts directly with astronauts on the ISS. Most of the astronauts who go to the ISS are licensed amateur radio operators, and there are some ham radios on the ISS that they can use to communicate. So in their off time, they'll do that. They'll get on the radio and talk to people.
It's
So-
analog or digital?
This is all analog. There's also there's some APRS happening with satellites as well. So a little bit of digital, but a lot of analog stuff going on with just voice, just phone. So that's something that you can check out. If you go to the amsat.org page, you'll see a list of active satellites, then get their information. And then there are apps you can have that will show you on your phone when a satellite is coming into view. It'll tell you where it's at, how high it's going to go, how long it'll be up, because you have to kind of follow it along with your antenna. And you do have to understand that there will be Doppler shift involved and all kinds of stuff because it's moving pretty fast. So you may have to tune a little bit to catch it and then tune as it flies by. Dan.
So having talked to astronauts on the ISS, it is best done with two people. Because one person is holding the antenna and reading off the frequency, because the Doppler shift is quite
It's rapid.
blurry.
Yeah. Yeah. It can,
And the other person is, as they're reading off the frequencies, you're also on VHF and UHF. You're on both bands, right? And so you're having to change
both radios.
both of them at the same
Yeah.
time, right? And but we made contacts on them,
So
So that was a nice bucket list thing
Yeah.
to do.
There's some of the computer programs that tell you the azimuth and elevation that you have to aim to track it across the sky.
and the frequency.
Will also automatically tune some radios. So that part of it can be automated. And, but yeah, it's still helpful to have.
In
some
fact,
guys doing this.
The tracking can be automated too. I've seen setups where they've got antennas on a dual axis rotator, and the computer controls it and will actually point the antenna and follow the satellite as it goes through its arc. So lots of cool things you can build and lots of cool things you can do with this kind of technology. It's really kind of slick when you think about it. Geez, I can actually talk to people in space just as a regular human standing here on Earth. I don't have to be a government official or something like that. Yeah, you can. It's pretty neat, pretty cool. Earth, Moon, Earth was mentioned a minute ago. EME, so you can bounce radio signals off of the moon. Typically, this is done somewhere between 6 meters and higher, but mostly on 2 meters and 23 centimeters. You do want some kind of specialized equipment. You need quite a bit of power to do this. The moon's 250,000 miles away. So your signal's got to go 250,000 miles to the moon. The moon is not super reflective. So some of the signal will bounce back, and you've got to have a sensitive enough receiver to pick that up. So you can see the nature of these antennas. So the guy on the left there is looks like a 2-meter rig, one antenna for transmitting and one for receiving, presumably. And then the one in the middle is a 23 centimeter microwave type rig. And looks like he's doing just one dish for both transmitting and receiving. But you can kind of see the profile there. You can get communications to people on the other side of the planet because the moon can be seen from such a wide distance because it's so far away. So kind of an interesting technology. It's not cheap to get involved in this because the antennas are definitely not cheap. The radios are not cheap to get the high power that you want, amplifiers and whatnot. But it's still kind of cool. It's another thing that you can do as a technician licensee. You do not have to have a general or amateur extra to bounce signals off the moon. So something you can do as a technician. Yeah,
If you do that, is somebody gonna respond, or do you like have somebody lined up on the? other
there's
end?
people listening all the time. Yeah,
And
So-
there is.
there are groups too.
There
Yeah,
are
so
online groups that coordinate contacts.
all right. Another esoteric way to bounce signals is off of auroras or meteor scatter. And this is another one of those uses of the ionosphere and its particular characteristics to get signals to go places that they wouldn't normally want to go, right? Normally, if you beam something into space on VHF, it's just going to go into space. It's not coming back. But with aurora up in the area, it will actually bend your signal around and send it back down towards the Earth. And so you can do aurora bounce and actually get signals to bounce through. Can you do this in Utah? Not most of the time. Most of the time, we can't really get the aurora down here. But last May we did. And in fact, this picture of the aurora that you see here, I took up by Corinne, up by the Golden Spike Monument. And this was taken with a regular camera. And you could actually see the aurora in the sky. It was really cool, right here in Utah. So there are occasions when you can do that. Typically, you're going to want to be farther north if you want to start playing with aurora bounce. There's also meteor scatter. As meteors come in, they will ionize, leave an ionization trail within the ionosphere, and you can selectively bounce signals off of that ionization trail. That's a little tougher to do, and you have to really kind of play with it a lot to get that to actually work. But people do that. And there are websites out there that will tell you where the meteors are likely to be. And there are groups, again, that get together and say, hey, let's plan some attempted contacts on meteor scatter and see if we can make this work. It's one of those things that is out there that you can do as a technician with VHF or UHF. You can do this kind of stuff. It's really kind of cool. You're not limited. As people think, well, I'm only a technician. I can only do repeaters or simplex, right? No, there's a lot of things out there that you can do. Amateur television is another one. This is actual broadcast quality television happening on amateur radio frequencies. So it's not the same as slow scan TV. If you guys have heard of slow scan TV, that's typically used on the HF bands. I've seen it done on VHF as well, but the old Kenwood THD7, you could buy a little camera for it that would actually take a picture and then send it via slow scan TV over a VHF signal. So people do that, or used to do that. I don't know if that still happens very much anymore, but it is possible to do.
And just know that emphasis on slow scan.
It's slow and it's low resolution. Okay, so keep that in mind.
It's essentially fax machine without paper.
Yes. It's basically fax machine quality. It'll be in color, so
Yeah.
not a little better than fax machine, but not great, right? But that's something that you can do too, is slow scan television stuff. And in fact, there are apps you can run on your phone that will do the slow scan encoding and decoding. We can play with that after we finish the presentation if we want to check it out. But this amateur television is actual television, just like watching it on TV on amateur radio frequencies. And most TVs actually can receive this. If you switch it to cable mode, it puts it on this band that is an amateur radio band. And so with a regular TV and an antenna, you can pick this up. Now, I don't know if anybody's doing ATV around Salt Lake right now. There are 2 repeater frequencies listed in the Utah VHF Society list of repeaters for amateur television. I don't know if they're active or not. I haven't been able to tune into them and see if there's anything there or not. But this is something that can be done, right? So if you want to play with this, get some people together, build some hardware or get some hardware, put it together. There's systems you can buy that are not super expensive, a couple $100, and you can be into it. to actually take a video signal from a video camera and transmit it on one of these bands that you can use for this, and then receive it with a regular television. And people have put these kinds of transmitters in amateur rockets and balloons as well. So, that's something that you can actually do. It's really kind of cool.
If you're gonna receive it on a cable-ready TV, it has to be in the 400 megahertz band,
Yeah,
because the TVs will go up to.
they won't go up to the 1.2, right? So, but there are transverters that you can get to adjust bands and things like that. So, check out this hamtv.com site. They've got a ton of stuff on there. A lot more than I was expecting when I started searching for this. It was like, well, what else can I talk about? Amateur television. I haven't talked about that before. I wonder what that's all about. And I found this site and it's like, holy crap, there's a ton of stuff there. So it's kind of an interesting utilization of amateur radio skills and frequencies to do something that you wouldn't normally consider doing. Speaking of putting cameras on balloons, a lot of amateur radio stuff goes on balloons, and there's a lot of balloons in the sky all the time doing stuff. These are amateur balloons. They're not operated by professional organizations. They're operated by amateurs. And if you go to this amateur.sondhub.org, you can see on a map all the balloons that are up right now, and see where they're at and what they're doing.
That door does not lock. So you're okay.
And this picture or this screen snap here was taken Monday. So you can see there was what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, at least 7 or 8, 9, 10 around the United States at the time that I took this.
Is
There's
that another one from China up there in Canada?
it could be, I don't know. There are basically two different classes of balloons. There are balloons that are designed to go up really, really high, and they typically go up really, really high, and then the balloon bursts, and then they come back down. And then there are these ones that they call pico balloons, where the goal is for it to go up to about 30,000, 35,000 feet and stay there as long as possible. And so you'll see these things go around the world multiple times in the jet stream. It's really quite interesting to follow some of these along and see what they're actually doing. Typically, these will use APRS for tracking. They may use it on the regular APRS frequency. They may use a separate frequency specific for the ballooning. And Whisper is another protocol that's used. And I don't know a lot about Whisper. I know that it's a super low power setup. And I've seen some of these pico balloons where the radio is basically the size of a postage stamp, and it's got a couple of wires hanging off it, and that's the antenna. And there's a little teeny solar panel that powers it. And so when it's in daylight, it's transmitting. And when it goes into the nighttime, it stops transmitting because it has no power. And then eventually it comes around to the sun again and starts transmitting again, or the sun comes around to it, or the earth rotates, or whatever. But there's some cool stuff happening with balloons all the time. And I think that would be a fun thing for us to do some summer, is build a balloon and shoot it up and see what we can do with it. So I know there was a group around here. I want to say it was it Crossroads that put it up? It was. Yeah, I think it was Crossroads that put up a balloon, not last year, but the year before, I think it was. And had a blast with it. So it's a cool thing. There's also a lot of amateur rocketry happening here in Utah. Down on the Pony Express Trail, they actually have a launch pad out there, and they do launches quite often out there. And so you'll see some rockets with amateur radio stuff on it. Yes, Steve. These are temporary. Yes, these.
Stay up in the air.
Well, they go around the world. So the pico balloons will stay up for weeks. The high altitude ones will typically go up and stay up for several hours. They'll climb up to 100,000 feet, and then the balloon will burst and they'll come back down. So they have a little parachute on them and they'll come back down.
Do you have to have FAA coordination with that?
You
'Cause if
don't.
You're at 30,000 feet, that's like airplanes flying. 30,000
Yes,
feet.
yes, they do. And no, you don't, as far as I'm aware.
They do have to file a report of their intended,
Do they?
yeah,
So there's a no TAM for it, presumably?
yeah.
Okay. So apparently you do have to notify somebody
They
that you're
have to
gonna
be
do this.
built so that they won't cause problems
If they're ingested. Well, hopefully they don't get ingested, but
Yeah.
yeah, don't cause problems for the plane. I mean, they would definitely cause problems for the, yeah, I don't know enough about it. So Paul says, yes, they do. You do need to file some paperwork so that it's known that you're doing that. And presumably that turns into a notice to airmen that there's balloons in the area. But yeah, see, the interesting thing about balloons is because they're uncontrolled, they have right of way over other aircraft. So, technically, if
Wouldn't
you,
they have to have some kind of transponder on them?
they don't have to.
Transponder is only required if the aircraft has an electrical system.
Yeah. So no, they don't have to have it,
Yeah,
but
battery power is exempt from that.
in the context that we're talking about with putting an amateur radio thing on it, that would count, I think, for a transponder. So
No,
it's not an aviation transponder, but it would be providing telemetry, right? So,
I see, so that air traffic see it.
yeah, they can't see it. They could probably monitor whatever feed the hams are sending. But it wouldn't put up on their gear automatically. A Jed KI-7NNP does a lot of rocketry and stuff.
Jed does.
He might be able to.
I know a guy who does a lot of rocketry, Claire Mills. I don't know if he's a ham or not, but I know he does a lot of rocket stuff.
So
So
it's James that together with
the balloon.
us.
Yeah, that was a one-time project though. Jed's out every other weekend shooting rockets.
Yeah, those rockets, so if you're familiar with the old Estes rockets and the little A size engines and B size engines and the big ones were the D size, these guys are using like H and I sized engines. They're monsters.
Stage.
Yeah, they're big, right? So Claire brought one of his rockets into the office one time, and this thing was like 15 feet long and a good 10 inches around. So it's pretty amazing what they put together to fly out there. All right, so we'll finally get to the elephant in the room, upgrading. So as a technician, you do have the opportunity to upgrade your license class to general or amateur extra. It opens up a whole new world of HF communications, right? Long distance comms, a lot of cool stuff. You can do multiple digital modes. There's slow scan TV on HF. There's POTA and SOTA and other activities. POTA is parks on the air. SOTA is summits on the air. There's also, as we found out in our conversation a couple of weeks ago, silos on the air. I imagine there's probably other ones for other things.
Islands on the air.
Islands on the air. Yeah, people do de-expeditions where they will take radios out to some far away place that has nothing, and they'll set up and operate, and they'll get a special license, special call sign for that operation, and people try to make contacts with that.
I want to take a Magnum and do dumpsters on the air.
Dumpsters on the air. See, I want to start an airports on the air and do operating from general aviation airports all over the country there, because there's thousands of general aviation airports all over the place. And there are good resources with lists of all of them. So it would be fairly easy to build something like that with a similar quality to parks on the air and summits on the air.
I'd
So
like to do it on April Fool's Day and get a
that would be fun. But when you do that, let me know.
I'll be around April 1st.
It'll
Yeah.
have to be have dried potato or banana
On the QSL card. Yeah. So field day is another event. It's an annual event where amateurs try to make as many contacts as possible in a 24-hour period. You'll hear about people, they haul a bunch of gear up to some park somewhere, some field somewhere, and they'll set up their stuff and try to make as many contacts as they can. And there's also even a winter field day that they do every year, which seems like a dumb idea to me, but you know, hey, to each their own, right? So
Is, a lot of, there is an activity at field day for extra points that involves making a satellite contact. So if you want to see one of those done, a lot of times field day is a good place to see that happen.
So Paul points out that field day has an extra points activity for making a satellite contact. They don't count repeater contacts, I don't think so,
Except unless they're orbiting.
unless they're in orbit, right? So that's something that you could even participate in field day as a technician. And of course, as a technician, you can operate under someone else's license while they're sitting next to you. And so you could get some experience doing some HF operating at a field day event. So definitely consider that next time there's a field day. Field day is always the same weekend every year. It's what, the fourth weekend in June?
The fourth full weekend,
Yeah,
or the weekend of the fourth Saturday.
yeah. So that's an option for people who are interested in that.
And it's pretty easy to get your general. I audited a technician class with Mark. Almost Mark, when he finally got around to getting his technician license. And last night was the night to take the test. They brought in an examiner and so on. And they asked me, Kevin, you want to take the test? I said, well, no, I'm already a technician. And I said,
Oh, you're that kid.
yeah, I'm watching.
SBA.
That Mark, okay.
And I said, "Oh, I'm already a technician. Oh, well, try for your general.
Yeah.
Okay, I took it fast.
Good.
So it's not hard.
We're going to talk about the test in a second. So, another popular HF activity is contesting. We did kind of talk about that in the context of field day, but there are tons of different contests out there. Worked all states is a very popular one. Basically, you log a contact with somebody in each of the 50 states, and you can get a certificate from the ARRL that says you worked all states. There's also, I've seen worked all counties, I've seen worked all continents, I've seen worked all countries.
Worked all grid squares.
You can't really do worked all countries because there's 2 countries that don't allow amateur radio. So worked all countries doesn't really work, but you can work all the countries that it's legal to work.
There's worked all continents.
Work all continents, and Antarctica is a continent. You can make contact with people in Antarctica at one of the science stations down there. So that definitely counts. You can also explore radio propagation around the world. It's kind of cool. There are beacons out there that are transmitting. You can track those and figure out where you can get communications to. And it's interesting to see the differences between propagation during the day and night on various bands. And so as you learn that, you'll realize, well, gee, if I want to make a contact with somebody in Australia and it's daytime here and nighttime there, I need to use this band. And if it's the other way around, I maybe need to use a different band to get my signal to them. So as you play around with that and learn that, it's really quite cool. So upgrading to general, you have to pass elements 2 and 3. Now, if you've got your technician license, you've already passed element 2. You don't have to take it again. So remember when we were talking about how there was a Morse code requirement back in the day? Morse code test was element 1. When they removed the Morse code requirement, they did not renumber the test elements. And so for technician, you only have to have element 2 now. And for general, you need elements 2 and 3. There's basically a test very similar to the one you took for technician. It has various subjects, and I've got a list of the subjects here. I'm not going to read them all off. But if you pass the technician test, you can probably pass the general test. It's not, the information is a little bit different. It's in a little different area. You're more concentrating on RF safety and rules and things like that. But basically, the information is similar, and it's 35 questions. You have to get 26 right to pass. Same rules as apply with the technician class license test. So there's a lot of great resources out there, both online and in books. There's local groups that will do classes. Hamstudy.org is a superb resource. I encourage people to use that. You probably have already used it to get your technician license. So check it out. There's lots of stuff out there, lots of availability for resources to learn the stuff for general. Extra is very similar. You need element 4 in addition to elements 2 and 3. So if you already have your general, you only have to take element 4. If you only have your technician, you have to take elements 3 and 4 and pass them both. The element 4 test is a bit more involved. It's 50 questions instead of 35. The questions are more involved and they require deeper knowledge. But again, if you can pass the technician and the general, if you study for it, you can pass the extra. Okay.
They
So
got rid of the advanced.
there is the advanced licenses are still out there, and if you have an advanced, you can still renew it, but they are not issuing new advanced licenses. Same with novice. They're not issuing new novice licenses either. So you will still run into some people who have novice licenses, but they've just renewed them every 10 years. So they continue to have it. And if you have there's basically the 3 classes right now that you can get: technician, general, and amateur extra. Again, there's resources online, there's printed materials, you can find study materials there. And when you're ready, find a test session, go take the test, get out there and get your upgrade. And then buy an HF radio and start doing some stuff. So a lot of cool stuff. So now go communicate, get out there, try a new mode, experiment with new equipment, explore Morse code, build some antennas, talk to other hams, look at what they've got going, what they're doing, get involved with your local club, learn a new subject and teach a class on it, upgrade to general or amateur extra. Get out there, use the radio, use your skills. It's your hobby. It is what you make of it. Okay. We didn't get involved in ham radio to sit our license up on the shelf and look at it every once in a while and say, look at that great thing that I did there. We got it so that we could talk to people, so we could communicate and learn some things about technology and do some fun stuff. Get out there, do some fun stuff. If this little girl can do it, you can do it. Okay. That's it. She's probably an extra, right? Yeah. So any questions or comments? This is the link to that Wi-Fi distance test where they did the 237-mile Wi-Fi shot. So if you want to check that out, this will be online after the meeting. But cool stuff. Yes.
We're borrowing service on another repeater now. Do we have a different repeater that we can access?
So right now we're using a repeater that Sammy has put up, and he is allowing us to use that indefinitely, as far as I know, until we can get ours back online. We are still waiting for the tower climber to get scheduled to actually come out and do the work. So that could happen. Dan, do you have any estimate on when that might happen?
I just got a message from Nick this morning.
Still do a roll call?
He said that they've tried, they're waiting on return phone calls. And so they've tried reaching out. He said he'd be trying reaching out again today. So I haven't heard what the results were.
Okay.
But it's frustrating.
Yes, it's very frustrating. We know what needs to be done. We have the skills to do it, but they won't let us do it because we don't have any insurance for that. So
It's like you're certified, could you do it?
Just sign a waiver.
yeah, they won't. They won't. The city attorneys are very very pedantic about that, and they will not allow us to climb the tower.
It's on Murray property, it's on a Murray tower,
Yeah.
and it's controlled by Murray attorneys.
So something about, not wanting the city to get sued or something. I don't know, but
Certified when you climbed up that tower? Will not be watching?
Yes, Steve, I was certified.
Good. All right. You're welcome.
sure, he was certified. Sure he was. Okay. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and stop the recording. Unless anyone has questions about what we talked about? Nope. All right, I'm gonna stop the